Hey guys, welcome back to episode 3 of Coach Connection, Mastering Youth Sports with your two hosts. I'm Coach Eric, and
I'm Coach Sergio. What's up, guys?
hello guys, how y'all doing? So today is going to be a really cool topic, and the topic for today is speed. Okay, so obviously we are sports coaches, so speed is something that's always a talk of so what sport you're talking about. You always are talking about the fast kids, the quick kids. So obviously, speed plays a big role into what we do, especially from a performance standpoint. Like we are trying to get our athletes better, so we're always working on trying to get them faster. So today we're going to talk about some of our approach or methodologies that we use to get players faster. Also, some different the difference in approaches from when we were training, when people were training us, what our coaches did with us, compared to what we're currently doing with our athletes. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about speed training for all sports and how it relates. Also, if adults should be also doing some speed training and why that could be beneficial depending on who you are. Is natural God given more important or more of a precursor to speed than just working on it? How speed correlates with performance. And we're going to talk about a cool approach to speed, which involves decision making, which has nothing to do with actual running, but more of the mental side of sports. And last is speed over time, being able to maintain your speed and why that's important. So, guys, again, welcome back. This is week 3. We also want to give a thanks to Riverside. If you guys are thinking about having your own podcast and you're feeling a little stuck on the technology, Riverside FM, they're really good. We recommend them. This is what we've been doing, and it's been really easy for us because we're both super busy and we don't really have time to edit stuff and do a lot of things. So the software actually does a lot of the pulling power for us, and we're just able to show up here and record and speak about what me and Coach Serge speak about on the weekly anyway. All right. So, Coach, let's start. All right. So,
Yeah.
speed training in sports. Where should we start with that? I mean, it's such a broad topic.
Well, honestly, I wanted to say I love this topic. We've been on this for a long time, and I love the topic because it is such a blanket topic across sports because it's one of those skills that just correlates with performance across all sports. It's always going to be a valuable skill because a lot of sports, like let's be honest, you just have to get there first. Getting there first milliseconds first, half a seconds first is a huge difference, and ultimately the getting the job done for whatever the sport is, making the basket, scoring the goal, hitting the shot back on tennis, all these things. Speed is absolutely one of the most important ingredients for performance. So I'm happy to talk about it because, again, I think early on we understood that and we incorporated it into our training. So I'd love to bounce back with you and see how um how you kind of differentiated your training to try to teach this skill of speed.
Well, first of all, I gotta
What is speed?
Oh, like, I think I said this a few times, but standing on the, shoulders of a lot of really smart people by the time we got to become coaches, there's just so much knowledge and there's just so many amazing people that you could learn from. There's obviously a lot of crappy, people out there too, but that's part of the discernment and intuition as a one being to be able to find where you could find that info that you're looking for because it's out there and obviously something that's a little more uh applicable because it has to be applicable. It has to be applicable in a team setting, has to be applicable in an individual setting. And of course, I want to give a big shout out to Coach Mike Boyle, which he's actually the one that put us on to Tony Holner. And then from that, I put Coach Sergio on to all this crazy stuff that we've been doing for the past, like I would say, 5, 6 years. Before that, my speed training was very focused on form and like teaching kids to run with better form and I think that's something that is part of the whole speed thing. But once I saw what Michael Boyle was doing because of Tony Holner and we started measuring our speed weekly, I think that's when I for my sake I'll say that it's when I started seeing players actually get faster. And obviously I thought it was so smart because we're always competing in sports. So finding a way to compete against yourself and try to beat your own times and trying to get faster, not just, comparing it to other players. Because for example, in football, like we can't expect the offensive lineman to be as fast as your wide receiver but both of them have to be fast enough to do their job. Like, a offensive tackle has to pull and be able to get ahead to set a good block, and so he has to be fast too. But obviously, the running back has to be a certain level of speed. The wide receiver has to be a certain level of speed. Like all these skills, sides of sports, they all require speed. Obviously, when we talk about soccer, right, it's a little different because I kind of would like all my 10 guys that are on the field to be fast if possible, right? If it was possible in a perfect world, right? Same thing probably with like any basketball coach will tell you they'd want all their basketball players to be fast. They want all their football skill position guys to be fast. Lacrosse, same thing, kind of like soccer, right? Like you need to be fast. You need to be able to get to that spot first and be able to like either cut people off or beat people, run around them. So so obviously speed is super important. And that's pretty much what we've been doing different. To put it in like the most simple terms is just we measure what we do, right, coach?
Yeah, that's been the biggest game changer for me, Eric, and I give you the credit. I know obviously there was a bunch of great coaches, but we did also, we did our homework and we studied it. And, really after you realize it feels so obvious. Speed is one of the few skills that you can actually measure and get an objective measure. Some of the other stuff like in the sports, like you either got it or you don't. But speed, it's like everybody can measure, everybody can improve. And of course, in a natural competitive environment, there's times being shouted out. You want to get the lowest time possible. And again, we don't always encourage that. You always want to compete with yourself first, but still, it's just a natural thing. You want to say you're the fastest or be in the top three. But I loved how you touched on the whole team aspect because raising everybody's speed just a little bit, I think, will have a big impact on the field performance. I'm a soccer coach, so of course I'm looking at it in that realm. But now that I'm getting back into it on the club side, I'm super excited to incorporate and capture the data, and actually track how we're doing.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think the tracking is probably what's going to make the most difference to the listeners out there who are going to start trying to implement some speed training in their training. Is you obviously got to be measuring and you got to be tracking, and I would say it has to be at least once a week because depending, I guess, if team setting, right, you only have so much time. But the cool part about what Tony Holliner teaches is really that you don't need a lot of time. And with the technology nowadays that you could buy lasers for $600, which, depending on, your budget as a coach, I don't think that's that much of an investment for like what you can get out of these lasers and the competitive fire that you could bring out of kids, especially in a team setting, especially in your setting where it's like travel kids that are like kind of good and they're competitive as it is. Getting them to compete against each other is really valuable, and also for you to understand like who are your faster players, right? Because I think from a scheme side of things, understanding your personnel and what you're working with can also help you with like how you're trying to do your X's and O's when it comes to soccer. So if you want to touch a little bit on that.
Well, I think that going back to Boyle, I think what he made us realize is that yes, it's great to track and everything, but it's also great to have your athletes try hard, right? So that the radar also just gives you that extra drive to really give the effort. And I think that's like we always say that's where the magic happens is that effort. Of course, the number is the number, but if you have it in the back of your head, you give a little bit extra than maybe if you're just running a sprint without really being timed. It's just like if you line up against your buddies and you're going to race, you're probably going to run faster than if you run a sprint by yourself, right? So
Absolutely.
I think just that natural, whatever you could do to feed that natural competitive edge and get the effort out of people that they leave, feeling like they got a good workout and that they really put in, they really gave themselves. And then I think, well, later on we'll touch about that, but I think super important for the nervous system, right? To get jacked up, not all the time, but once in a while, because that's what's going to happen on game day.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. I love
yeah,
that you're touching on the feeding, the competitive. I forget how you said it exactly, but the feeding because
me
that's
too.
what Tony Holner talks about. He calls it feeding the cats, and what he means by that is like when you have a cheetah, like a cheetah's not out there running 20 sprints a day to get its meal. It's running a couple of them, and they're gonna be the best two sprints that he got for the day, right?
Right,
So,
right.
and then another thing that I love that you touch on is what this training does for the central nervous system. This is a guarantee way to get that caffeinated, like kind of almost like superhuman effect, like a tiny little dose you get. But again, this only happens when players are given their 100%. Like, and again, 100% is going to be relative to how you feel on the day to day per player, right? So sleep is super important. Like if you want to be fast, you got to be sleeping, guys. Y'all got to be sleeping 7 to 9 hours, like minimum, if you want to be fast. If you don't sleep, you know you're not going to be fast. Obviously, if like you had a game the day before and then you're going to speed train the next day, you're not going to have as much juice. But if you can give that whatever you got and try your best, again, you can get this central nervous effect, which a central nervous system effect, which I think is missing. Like you can't get that lifting weight. You only get it, you almost too, like, because we play, and it's like after we play soccer we have that like soccer high,
Yeah,
right?
the endorphins. I was about to say those endorphins after you only get it after you sprint, after a really hard practice, after a game. Um,
So those things, that's something that I think is worth, and that's why it's so cool with the speed training. Like you can get that, and you can start getting your players used to that a bit, and like being able to use that like energy. But like I always say, like I want to have that on the field. Like Tony Holner calls it the X factor. So I think sometimes as coaches, what happens is that most sports coaches are kind of burning they're like doing too much with their players. So finding out what the balance is, and obviously like kind of having a plan to like how you're gonna dose this and what days and whatever, like that's part of the art of coaching, as especially in a team sport setting. But I think it's again super important that you try to get some of the speed training done, because in the grand scheme of things, you are getting that like exposure to that, and then eventually players can use it, because if you are aware of what it feels like, then now I know, like, oh man, I feel really good today. This is one of those days where I could really make an impact on the game, because I'm feeling really good and I'm feeling really fresh. And also another thing you touched on was, okay, it's another meter for us. Like for me, a kid could tell me he's a certain level of sore and a certain level of tiredness, and sometimes the kids don't even feel that tired or that sore, but then they'll run a couple sprints. I know their usual time. Their time's a little higher than usual. So right away, hey, did you sleep? Is there something you didn't tell me? Something you didn't tell me that happened yesterday? Oh yeah, coach, I forgot. Like, we had a super hard practice, or like, oh, I didn't really sleep good. Like I'm not tired or nothing, but I didn't get good sleep. um, I didn't eat enough before the practice. So all these things are it's why, like, another cool thing of tracking it and measuring is you can keep a little bit of a eye on your players, and that way you can tell players, hey, you kind of got to chill out a little bit, or like, hey, this is a great day for you to push because you're feeling really good. So I think that's another thing where, if you're going to use this technology, why not? Right there, we just gave you like two or three reasons why you absolutely should. So if you don't want to do it, then that's a more of a personal thing.
Yeah, no, I love that because it's tricky for even I know for myself as an adult, it's tricky to know when I'm feeling the best. When I actually feel fresh until you get out there, run a few sprints, then actually, okay, it's going to be a good day, or I should take it easy today a little bit. Same thing for the athletes. So I think I love that point, and again, that number is consistent. It doesn't lie. So the distance doesn't lie. Measuring that, just keeping track of all that, and then over time tracking the improvement as well. So I agree with you that 100% is a game changer for the speed specific training.
Right, so let's get into our best part right now, where we get to talk to coach for all the soccer people out there, right? So we're gonna start with soccer speed, right? And do you want to just maybe give a breakdown of what soccer speed means to you?
Yeah, so soccer obviously is a field sport. You're running in all directions, different distances, planting, changing direction, side to side. So, of course, speed in all planes matter for soccer. The distances, not necessarily large distances. However, you do have to keep jogging, and then you do have to sprint again. Definitely it has its specific speed and specific distances. We touched a little bit on getting to the ball first, huge factor, because it is one step a lot of times, and that one step sets you up for or it doesn't. So definitely, there's intelligence involved as well. Some guys can get themselves in better positions. I know I definitely think about the game like that, trying to think one step ahead. But ultimately, is getting there and keeping control of the ball super important. And it's one of those things that I wanted to touch on just in general. It's like being fast, how much of it is natural and how much can be trained? Because we did touch a little bit like on the speed training and everything, but some guys are just fast. What is that, Eric? And then what do you think? What's the best way to keep feeding that, maintaining that, nurturing that? And, on the other side, what's the best way to help a kid that doesn't have that natural speed, let's call it, that natural
Right.
speed?
Right. So I mean, I think first thing you said that I think was that I thought was genius is, or still think obviously is genius is better athletes, better positions. Right. So that's so important. I think for the athletes listening right now, being able to get in a better position, and that's a combination of strength, that's a combination of mobility, to be able to get into these positions that put you in a more advantageous position, that put you in a position where like you're more prompt to get a better step, right, or a stop better, which is what we're trying to do in all sports, like who can stop the best and then who can go the fastest after they stop. So I thought that was super cool. And then the next thing is that you were saying is so genetics versus like everything, right? Because there's some kids who are just naturally fast, some kids who just and I see it from like the 7, 8 year old kids sometimes. Like you'll just have this one kid out of all they have 10, 8 year olds, and you'll have one or two, right? And they're super, super, super what's the word? Super fast. Like you'll have 2 out of the 10 that are like super fast, and they're very young. So how are they just naturally fast? They're not training their whole life. So I think there's two things when it comes to this kind of stuff. I think some kids like to run and they figure out how to run, and then I know for me, even as a 5, 6 year old, like I'm lining up with the fastest kid and we're racing. So that's starting from like when you're a kid. If you want to be fast, I think like I'll never forget like till I was like 7, I would say like in kindergarten, first grade, there was always like two girls faster than me. And so I would race them every year till finally around second grade I started beating them. So you're constantly competing whether you realize it or not.
Tag, playing tag and P.
Right, kids do it. I was gonna say kids do it naturally when they're playing. It's like man, like we used to play manhunt, we used to play shark and minnows, that type of stuff. And I think some of that stuff is probably lost in how kids play nowadays. But I think that's where a lot of that speed can happen. And obviously, I think like we're saying, genetics is genetics. Like if your dad was a fast and a good athlete, you're probably gonna have more of a chance to be a fast, good athlete. And if your dad wasn't, it doesn't mean you can't, but then that means that you're gonna need to be working on the stuff we're talking about, because that's actually the difference maker that me and you have found, is that you can get people that are not that fast to become fast and then eventually become even faster than some of the kids who are naturally fast, because it can be trainable. Now how fast and how like fast you could become, I'm sure genetics are gonna
Yeah, everybody has their
has a
ceiling.
ceiling. But I definitely think it's like, hey, if like every coach is telling you, hey, you're really good, but you need to get faster. Like you need to figure out where you can go to help somebody help you do that, because it's doable. Nowadays, you're in the world where like you can do this, and it's proven. And we can go right into old school old school soccer speed training to the new school approach that we do. Right. So we could touch base a little bit on that, on how what our soccer coaches used to do to us.
Right.
Right.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, I love real quick what you said about the genetics versus that the fact that it can be trained and it can be better, because I think most people like myself are somewhere in the middle, right? Like you have some ability, but you got to work it. You got to work it. You got to train it. It's got to be done 1,000 iterations, 10,000 iterations. And if you do, I think you will turn on the certain genetic predisposition that you have, and you will naturally get faster that way. So I think there's a lot of people that are somewhere in the middle that have a chance to be really fast if they work on it. And I would probably say most athletes probably fall somewhere in there. Now, going back to the old school way of training, I had coaches that we'd run 10 laps when we got to the field.
Right.
That was the training, the physical training, like, just lap after lap, jogging. I guess it's like a 5K almost, before you even start training, not taking into account necessarily the fact that that's not how the game is. You're not just jogging the whole time. You're stopping, you're going. It's very high intensity, broken up intervals. Just again, I don't want to be extreme, but that was just a consistent thing about jogging. I understand running a couple laps here and there. In some professional teams, they do it in the preseason to try to get guys back in shape. That's a different story. But just going to the field and running around the field, I don't do with my players. I don't warm up this way. I just think it's another old school way of doing it. Running 20 or more sprints. I've done that before.
And I
Why?
did, and the same here, and I didn't get any faster, which is kind of, you know, and we could touch base on that real quick. As you said, um, one of my coaches from FAU, one of my like from when I was, going to school there, one of our I called them coaches because they were all teachers, but they were all like coaches, in a way. And he used to say that like he was so mad at the fact that when he was trying to become an athlete as a teenager, that his coach would be like, "Yeah, just go run, and that will make you faster." And I still think that's what people think, that's how it works. And so that's kind of why we're doing this podcast today, is to maybe get this word out to some other people that might not have heard of Michael Boyle or Tony Hallner, or are familiar with track coaches or how track people do their stuff, right? That definitely, that is not that, like, there has to be a little bit more of a thought of how the sport works, because I think that's important. How does your sport work? And then based on that too, how are you going to set up the speed intervals? Like you said, interval, I think, is the super important word that people should catch on to here, because a wingback and a midfielder, they're gonna move different based on what their job is in the schematics of like their coach setting, right? So like, but for sure, both of those guys are gonna have to run a lot back and forth. So their sprints might be a little longer, right? Not that we're gonna make it in the team setting all like based on the position, but what we're saying is that you have to understand that like all the players are running these intervals throughout the field, and they have to be able to run them. And obviously, like, if you can run them over like consistently at that close to that same speed, then you're going to be better come the end of the games where everybody's tired, and you can still kind of
Correct.
touch that speed. You might not touch it like the first few sprints that you had, but obviously if you're like, consistently fast, you're consistently staying in that range, right?
You got to be one step faster than the defender,
Got to be one step, right? 1 step, 1 millisecond, like we spoke earlier. So I think that's super important that you mentioned, Coach. The overdoing it of training, I think it's what keeps kids slow. I love this from, I don't know, I've heard this from so many coaches, but I'm obviously gonna always give Michael Boyle his dues. And you train slow, you're slow. You train fast, you're fast. But you go and run the mile. Like, I'll use myself as an example. I ran a 4:45 mile in 11th grade, which is insane. Which is
That is
insane, right?
insane.
And then I would go and play, and I would suck. How? Well, now that I'm older, I understand why I sucked and why I wasn't the explosive player that I needed to be on the field. I could play longer than people, but again, if I can't beat you to that ball, or win that ball, or win that sprint, then it's tough for you to really stand out and get to play if like your goal is to play from high school to college or whatever. There's like a gap there. And we spoke, I think, last time on the podcast about like the difference between all the levels of sports, and why at each division the players are more athletic, which means that they're all faster. Like we're saying, back to the speed thing, they're all faster. So if you want to play with them, you got to be good as hell, right? You got to be good enough to be with them. So that's like a given. But then you also have to have enough speed to be able to hang with them, athletically, because it moves fast. And when you see real pros like up front, and you see how fast they are and how aggressive they are, I think that's where kids, when they see it on TV, they can't put that together.
Right.
No, but you go see some people live and you're gonna be like, whoa, man, like those guys are fast and they're quick. So I probably have to start working on that
And they're
too if I
giving
want
max
to be
effort
like them.
all the time. You know, and I think I love what you touched on because I think being able to apply the speed is the most important thing. Yes, speed is like this thing we want to capture, we're all working for. Okay, but being able to use it now in the game to maximize your performance, because the speed is just, it's just all to feed in the performance in the core or on the field, whatever it is you're trying to get done. It's just one of the best tools to get the job done, but you still have to get the job done. So you have to harness the speed, you have to harness the energy, and you have to be kind of aware of your gas tank. And I know you feel the same way. The ultimate goal is to be as energized and as fresh as possible on game day.
Game day.
Because game day is the test. That's what we're being judged on. So the way to get there is not necessarily to overdo it. It's just, but it's not to underdo it either. It's to do it right, right? That
The
sweet spot.
dosage, right? We always talk about dosing, right? How much dose, how much we do. And that's the hard part as a coach because you're training people, like we don't know how the kids really feel. We ask, we try to measure, but it's tough, But obviously I think communication is what's most important for like the coaches out there who want to be better. It's like you really got to communicate with your players. You got to get to know them. You got to ask them questions and if you ask enough and you probe enough, like you'll be able to help your players out more because like I tell you, sometimes the kids are think they're feeling good, and then we do a few sprints and they're like, "Dang, I'm not as fresh as I thought I was." And the first thing I say to them, coach, that day is, "Look, this is not a negative thing. I want you to realize, but that like this is more important for you to learn for game day. Like if you ever feel like this on game day, then you know what you're gonna perform like, right? But if you feel like where you're doing feeling really good, then I want you to associate that too. I want you to be like, whoa, so if I feel really good, then I'm probably gonna play really well. Players I don't like because they're consciously younger, they don't get that stuff really does like correlate.
Yeah, the day before you can easily burn off your legs the night day before. I'm excited for the season coming up because there's no practice Fridays. So, I think it's great for family time, reset a little bit, but also stay off your legs, like stay rested. I need you Saturday, Sunday to be fully there. And I wanted to touch a little bit since I think it's related, Eric, on the speed of thought, mental speed. We talk about speed, obviously, running, straight distances, changing direction, but we're talking about running. I think speed of thought, related specifically to soccer, is super important when it comes to decision making because, like you said, at a certain level, the decision making is what separates the really good players because everybody's athletic, everybody's strong, everybody's fast. And I also think this, as much as your legs can get tired, your mind can get tired. And if you have a tired or a foggy mind or distracted, you can't get your emotions under control, it's going to affect your decision making, which is super key to performance. So I think I wanted to throw that in there as just kind of like another way to think about speed because, a lot of things are decided in the moment. Yes, we're going off instinct, but there's something in your head first, whatever it is. Coach, I don't know if you feel it when you play, but like I definitely see like the move. Maybe I don't always consciously pick up on it, or maybe it's just I correlate that kind of with speed. I think it's related. I think that before you get there, you got to make the decision, right? That you want to get there. So whatever it is, whatever connection, mind body connection, I think it's all related.
I think it goes back to being intuitive. You gotta the intuition comes from playing. So people out there, you guys got to be playing in your sport to learn better. Then the next thing we talk about it again, like younger players don't do as much compared to what the older players do is they watch film. So if I watch something enough times and I'm aware that it could happen, and now I have the speed to also get to that decision or get to that spot or whatever, then that's gonna give me an advantage. And we've spoke about this before, where we've had this conversation about milliseconds, and maybe I get to the ball before you, right? But then what that allows me to do, since I'm faster, even though it's like an extra couple milliseconds, is that now I have more time to make a better decision. So I think that's where I think speed is something that people don't talk about. It's like if you're faster, then it's almost like another way that the game could slow down a bit for you, right? And obviously you got to be fast but in control, right? You can't be like the Sonic the Hedgehog out of control. You have to have some idea of like how much speed, but ultimately, like we were talking about, it comes down to that extra little millisecond that you can have, and then from there kind of already have an idea of what you want to do, and that's where you say it's almost unconscious. So that's why I say it was intuitive, because you kind of like, sometimes, and I think for any really like good athlete, they'll tell you like, when I do what I do, I'm not thinking, I just do it, it just happens. But again, some of that is going to be from repetition, watching film, and exposure, which, I think a lot of players are not getting all these things into their game. And that's why sometimes they get stuck and don't become like the version of themselves that they want to become.
Well, I would also add that comes from being fit and fresh, and we talk about being fit. If you're not training properly, during the week, or you're overtraining or undertraining, you can't expect to be able to pull it off, I guess, in the game. It's just, again, I'm speaking for myself as well, like how I feel like when I'm not fresh, like, oh man, it's that millisecond makes all the difference in the world, especially, a sport like soccer. It's where keeping the ball, that millisecond keeps you the ball. You keep possession, that's everything. Or you get your foot in and you score, that's everything. So for me, I love the subject, and I appreciate that you put me on to speed, because it is often overlooked, especially by sports coaches, especially by soccer coaches, that maybe they look a little bit sideways when they see you measuring everything, or they see you out with radars because nobody's doing it. But that, guess what? At the highest levels, they're tracking everybody's speed, and
Tracking everything. I think that's one another thing coaches don't understand is like, and that's again the technology, what it's allowed us to do. Like you could pull up right now, like check-in day for Arsenal, check-in day for Liverpool, whatever. Like I even saw the other day, I think it was Liverpool or Arsenal, and you saw their nutrition coach, like the head one, and like how she's measuring everything for the food, like what they're cooking, how everybody has to eat a certain amount of carbs and a certain amount of things, and
yep.
like so like guys, like if you want to be serious, like you got to be measuring a lot of stuff. It's a lot more work, but I always tell people this is like if you want to be a D1 kid or a professional player, you got to be living like one way before you actually become one. It's like this process that you're working on becoming this thing you want to become, but like you almost got to be it before you arrive. You got to be living like that, and that's what a lot of the kids that are not as good as like the really good kids, they don't understand that difference, but it's just that you don't really get what these other kids are doing that you're just not willing to do.
And they're
And
doing it consistently,
and
right?
not to put anybody down or like make people feel bad about how hard you're working, but you have to understand that like there's some guys out there that are really like they're focused, they're obsessed, and to be in the top 1%, which is like playing, after high school, you got to be like that. It's part of like the whole process of being a high level athlete is like you measure things, you're very aware of things. How much did I ate, what did I eat, what I didn't eat, how much I worked out today, how much did I sleep, how's my blood, how's my body. It's like these guys, and again, of course, some guys are not that serious about it. Some guys are, but I think we always say this. Probably 80% of the guys are like that, and then
Well, I
you have
think
the 20% of the
now you
unicorns.
have to be serious about it, because it's, with modern day nutrition. I love what you said, though. You have to be a pro before you sign the contract. You have to be, because, uh, and I tell, and it sounds a little harsh, but I tell my boys all the time, like, you have to be a man, and you have to understand the responsibility that you're going to go take someone's job, and again, or if you're a woman, you have to be a woman, you have to be a grown woman, and understand that you're moving away, yeah, to take somebody else's position. So they're not going to just give it to you. You have to be ready for it, and all the challenges, ready for the setbacks, and ready to respond. But yeah, I definitely agree. The difference with professionals is that they're thinking about all these different aspects. They're thinking about the diet, the sleep. I think we touched a couple times on this. It's a holistic thing, right? Because it all goes back to your performance, and all these factors play a huge role in performance. Aside from your 3 hours on the field or in the gym, those other 20 hours of your day are super important. And I would add to that, maintaining a healthy family or relationship, that balance as well. We talked a little bit about going out in nature, doing different things to stay stimulated, stay connected. I think that all those things become factors. And again, just trying to be fresh, trying to be at your best when it's time to perform. And that's the goal for my teams as a whole. And I think that should be every individual athlete's goal and also my goal as a coach. I'm judging myself the same way, I guess, on the same standards. So I love it, coach. We all need to try to be professional because that's ultimately, I think, the goal. And when you arrive there, it doesn't necessarily mean you're getting a big contract. You're doing things like a professional.
Yeah, you gotta live it. You gotta become you're already what you have to already be that before you actually somebody tells you that you are that or pays you or you sign that contract or however you wanna summate that you're a pro, like that you're now a pro. So with that we can go now into and it's funny that you said that about being a professional because I think all adults can listen to this and understand like us as adults, right? Our pro, our games is our job. So are you guys are we eating enough? Are we sleeping enough? Are we balanced with our relationships with our family, with our kids? Are we connecting to nature a bit? Are we getting off the phone, getting off the technology? And I think if you are taking care of this holistic approach, then you're gonna probably do better in your job. You're probably gonna do better with your family. So I think like part of being like exercising and taking care of yourself, it's that it bleeds over to other things that you might not correlate, but it's all connected. So like how I treat my body is how I'm gonna treat somebody else. How I respect myself is how I respect you. So, something for all of adults, all of us to think about. And I want to touch base on speed training for adults real quick.
Right, right.
I think I think I think adults because it's proven you're gonna lose. I think it's 1.8% of your speed after 40, like every like your power, right? Every year after that you're losing more and more power.
Yeah.
So like
Plus,
the only thing you could do, right? Like if your power is 180, right? 2 years you would already lose like 3 digits worth. You would be at 177 point something. So so guys, sprinting could be a great way if your body's ready for it. And again, back to if you're an older person, probably got to get with a good coach that can dose it right for you, that can expose you to the right amount, because not everybody's ready to be running. As crazy as it sounds, not every adult can run a 15-yard fly. So let alone
or
we're not
should
going to be
do.
running 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards, 100 yards. Like you got to ease into stuff, and then obviously like your effort, right? Like if we can't go too hard right away because you could like really tear a hamstring. You could like rupture your calf. There's like so many things that go into play with the speed training that kids and athletes don't have to worry about that much because they're consistently being exposed to these type of things, like they're sprinting all the time. But an adult, if you want to get some speed training, then I think it's smart for you to start light. And if you can, hire somebody that can like help you do it so you don't get hurt. And some options are you could jump, which again still could be dangerous depending on the adult that you are. You could you could blow out a knee or hurt an Achilles doing some jumps that you're not ready for. And then the last one that I think is the safest is probably just throwing medicine balls, which if you weigh 150 pounds and you grab a 4-pound medicine ball, I highly doubt that you're going to hurt yourself. It's still possible, of course, but, throwing that really far or jumping a little bit with it or tossing it, like those are ways that we could work on power. But I think ultimately there's nothing like sprinting. And I only say that because I sprint like once or twice a week. And then when I go play, then I'm like, wow, this makes such a difference in just how I hold up and also like just still staying kind of fast even though I'm 35. So again, not that I need to get faster, but to me it's just like, hey, if I want to keep playing soccer, I want to try to keep some of this being able to reach these speeds and not feel like, oh my god, I might hurt myself cuz like this is too intense, right?
Yeah, that's a real fear, I think, as an adult. I joined the 35 club too. So, man, it's definitely in the back of your head because sometimes it's the brakes, it's not even going so fast, but then the brakes after. Yeah, knock on wood, I've been able to avoid those injuries, but I think like everything, you got to use it or you're going to lose it. And I would say definitely, start slow, like be nice to yourself. Don't try to jump the 36-inch box right away. And slowly build on it, but definitely if you do focus on it, I think it's like the most bang for your buck, as far as something kind of something to target, as opposed to just doing cardio for cardio's sake or whatever. I think, okay, if we want to get more power, we want to get fat. Eric, you see me?
We were the last one that I do want to you to elaborate a bit on is speed over, like being able to maintain your speed over time, and like what you meant by that, and then we can talk a little bit more about that, and that's pretty much it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, definitely. I think you actually said it earlier, like especially specific to soccer. Like if you can be faster later on in the game, or at least maintain, close to the same speed, it's a huge advantage because a lot of times that's the first thing that goes right. You can still execute some things technically, but you just can't get up and down the field. You can't get certain spots because you're just tired, So having a little bit of extra legs, and I think that all ties in with the consistent speed training, smart way to do it, effective, the right dosage. And yeah, just being a little bit faster in the game where everybody's a little bit slower. I think when we measure kids with the radar, you can tell which kids kind of stay in that same range and which
Mhm.
ones drop off. And what does that tell you, coach?
I'll repeat that last part. I'm sorry, coach.
So,
Just the
so
last
if
part.
you're measuring different groups of kids, right? You can tell which kids are staying kind of close to their max, like and then which kids there's a big drop off after the first 3 or 4 sprints, maybe. So for me, that's like an endurance factor, which whatever you want to call it, conditioning, endurance, but being able to maintain that speed, I think it's also a good measurement and a good way to be effective later in the games.
I think endurance is important. I think when we talk about conditioning, that's where I think for sports players, you got to be doing a little bit of weight training and loading, and getting into some of these isometric, holding positions. Isometric is just fancy for, let's say you get into a lunge position, but instead of lunging and exploding up, you just hold the lunge. Right. So this is what I mean by isometrics, like just holding these positions. I think there's a lot of value in those to get you to get more used to, load more higher load over time. But at the same time, I think when it comes to players, sometimes like towards the end, not, being able to keep up their sprint times, I think it also has to do with effort. And I think me and you both know that there's just like a lot of kids are just not willing to really give their 100%, like whatever their 100% is. Cause that's one thing I try to teach the players all the time is like anything I want you to learn with me is that you got to learn how to work hard the whole time. Like, because if you approach this to anything in life, like you're going to get more out of anything you do. And I think because we're kids, we don't think that that's how it works. But if this is a faculty that, this is just a skill that you can learn, is just to work hard all the time, to really try to work your hardest. Like every rep, you try to do it the best. Every sprint, you try to run your hardest. Like it's not necessarily rocket science. It's just tough I think, for kids, especially like kids that are very comfortable and like enjoy a really good life, to push themselves out of that comfort zone. But I think that's where sports could really be transformational for kids because it could teach you how to like, hey, like I have to struggle a bit. I have to push a bit past where I think I can go, and that's where like we see change happen, especially with speed training. Like the kids that get faster are the kids that show up and try the hardest, not anybody else. Like everybody else will get faster over time, but the kids that get faster literally, that get faster in a shorter amount of time, is because every time we sprint and I pull out them lasers, they're gonna go hard in those 6 sprints. Like I always tell them, I'm like, look, we're not running 20, we're running 6. And to me, it's crazy because I'm like, I can't even believe that I have to have this conversation with you, because if you're a travel kid, like you should have to be you should be wired this way, because this you're going up against some kids that are like this. So if you're not like that, you're already gonna lose. Like, and I hate to say that, and people are not gonna be happy to hear that, but that's what it is. You like, basketball terms, like there's some dogs out there. Like there's some kids who when they get to work, when they get to their field or their sport, Like they're completely different people, and they don't, and they all they want to do is kick your butt, and like that's it. They're like they don't want to be your friend. So if we can't push ourselves out of the comfort zone by ourselves, when we have to compete against somebody who's gonna do that to us, we're gonna flop, we're gonna fold.
I love it. I love it. I love the transformational part. There's no like there's no hiding on the field. You know, it's all about performance. It's all about, you know, what can you deliver there and then in the moment. You cannot buy that. You know, you cannot. Yeah, I love it, man. And it goes back to hard work and effort being a skill. Effort's a skill. You know, hard work. If you have it in you, that's a huge skill. And just like speed, it goes across everything, you know? So I love it, man. I think it was great to touch on this subject. It was very broad, but that's what makes it powerful, right?
Yeah, it's like you were saying, the blanket, and again, like speed to me is also like the outcome. It's what is like what we're doing all this stuff to become. So obviously, working on it, training it is one part of it, but it's also understanding that like getting your strength work in, sleeping, eating, resting, all this stuff is gonna help you become faster. So you have to kind of be aware of it, you know. And the last thing I want to touch base on quick is you said speed over time. I think athletes get fast and stop working on it. And I think that's so like, especially like I would say like this in soccer. Like if you're a Division 3 pro, because I know some Division 3 kids. Like I know I've been in the game long enough that I've seen some kids, you know, come from like the travel youth leagues here. I'm not gonna say what clubs or whatever or any names, but now they're playing in Mexico, they're playing in Panama, they're playing in, you know, like Costa Rica, Brussels, Austria, like maybe a Division 3 team in Italy or Germany, right? Like there's kids doing this out there, and like to me, what I think a lot of those players could benefit from is like if you want to get a contract and go up a league, you're gonna have to get faster. And so if you want to work over time, if you can keep working on your speed over time, I think it also will help you with like your goal to maybe eventually play at the highest league that like you can play in like the realm you're in. Does that make sense?
Right, of course.
Like I think because I think most kids, like most players are just like, oh well, this is how fast I am, and that's it, and not understanding like, hey, you might be amazing on the ball, but the reason why you can't compete with the next division up is because you're just not as fast as them. And this is something that you could actually work on. It's going to take effort. It's going to take some grit and some, we talked about not grit, but it's just like a little bit of like extra attention to it. But it's something that a lot of players could really benefit from, and that could really like, hey, you're trying to make some extra money, like invest into some real good speed training, and it is going to come back to you because you're probably going to be able to sign a bigger contract, or hopefully sign a contract with a bigger club that pays you more.
Yeah, and any athlete that like, because I see it too. You know, sometimes we're running sprints, coach. You know, like you have to understand that that effort is going to pay you back so much. You know, and the effort is really like you said. You know, it's not overdoing it either. It's just getting it in and getting it in fully focused. You know, and it's going to pay you back so much when you go play. And I think, you know, once you get into a certain rhythm, the sprints feel good. You know, they should feel good. So again, everybody's starting at a certain place. We talked about adults and how you should start very slow, but once you're a well-grooved athlete, the sprint should feel good, you know, opening up your lungs, getting the endorphin rush and activating the central nervous system. Like there's nothing more explosive than sprinting that you can do with your body, right?
That's the safest, yes, and thank you that you pointed that because that like you could lift weights, you could throw things, like nothing produces as much power in a safe way like sprinting. As aggressive as it is, your body's designed to do it, and so it's more about you doing it and really trying hard. And I think that's where like the magic, happens. And of course, like anybody listening out, guys, like I always say this is like the coaches are never asking who's that slow guy over there. They're asking like, yo, who's that kid? He's fast. So if you're not fast, or people don't say that about you, there's probably something worth investing some actual like coach saying effort and focus into it, because it could really change your status and your ranking as a player.
Yeah, I love it, coach. I love how it all ties in. And yeah, man, we the human body, man. We were hunters back in the day. So
There's
I
many
think
things
that
we could do, right? We just definitely don't tap into that. And I'm thankful because like we don't have to hunt anymore, thank
yeah.
God. But it's something good that I think like we were saying, it's just good for the body. Like you'll feel better. Being able to sprint, a nice amount of length, like 40, 50 yards, and being able to do it like without worry. I think that's something cool. I think we take it for granted. And I think when we were kids, right, what did we love to do is just like go run. Let's just go run. Let's just go do that. And I think that's something that we lose track of as we get older, but it's something that you can do that will also even bring you back a little bit to your like inner child, and to make you remember like some of the best things in life are definitely still free,
it definitely keeps you young too.
and keeps you young. As again, we just give it to you in the science. If you work on your power and you lose less power, that means you'll age slower. So that means you'll be able to move better when you're 60, 70, 80, if that's something that's your goal. But for me, like, just being pain free and being able to do stuff with my kids and grandkids when I get to that age, that's what I'm training for right now. So it's crazy to think that that's what I'm training for like 30 years down the line. But this is how we should definitely approach like our like what we do with our body, especially in these like mid 30s, for like all my mid 30, mid 40 people that hopefully listen to this podcast.
I love it, coach. I love it. Anything else you want to touch on? I think
Nah,
we're good.
coach, I think that was great. I think we touched a great. I'm gonna try to put Coach Michael Boyle's and Coach Tony Holner's Instagrams on the description in our podcast, so you guys could check them out too. They have really good podcasts. If you guys want to listen and learn from some of the OGs and some of the dudes that have been doing it for 30 plus years. So again, to my young coaches, instead of trying to figure out it and trying to make your own wheel, just go and tap into some of the elders, and really get some of this wisdom that can only come from experience and years of actually doing it. So I think it's more valuable for you guys to learn from them than from some of the younger coaches that are out. So thank you, coach, as always, for taking your time. Guys, please stay tuned. I think the next few weeks we might have some guests, so it's gonna be some cool stuff, for whoever tunes in. And thank you guys for sharing this time with us. Let's be kinder to each other in this crazy world, and everybody's going through stuff. So be nice, smile at people, say hello, and even if somebody's mean to you, try to be nice to them anyway.
Yeah, I love it, coach. I'll see you next
Take
week.
care, coach. I'll
Yep.
see you. Have a great day.
Take care, bro.
Peace.